Good evening. You are watching another episode of Awoken with Aulden. I'm your host, Aulden S. Nance, and we have a terrific show for you tonight, wanting to discuss the election coverage, the election results from Tuesday evening. We were with each other that evening. As you knew, there was a power outage that affected the coverage and the length that I was able to live stream with you guys. However, tonight the power outage has been resolved and we are back and stronger than ever before. So, first off, just want to kind of give a brief general outline of my immediate thoughts. And the immediate thoughts are it's not good what happened. Obviously, for the Republicans, as the three major contests were not particularly competitive whatsoever at all. In Virginia, I don't think anyone thought it would be that massive of a victory for Spanberger. In New Jersey, I know people were hoping it would be a little closer. And in New York, that was probably the one that was most expected. However, Cuomo and Curtis were really unable. The coalition was fractured, and it was really decided after the June primary that Mondami was going to be the next mayor, and it was just a matter of time until anything, until that more or less my family is screaming right now for the football game, I believe. However, it was just kind of it all brought together. It was just waiting to happen, and Mondami became the next mayor of New York City, slightly with a little more than slightly a 50% a majority of the vote. So that's the immediate thoughts. Even though that they were blue contests and blue states, it's still not great for the Republicans. You would have liked a stronger showing. The National Party really seemed to be kind of dragging their feet, lousy. They Earl Sears and Citarelli were particularly not promoted very well, I thought. Even though it is their individual race, the party really was not much of an assistance, I thought. And especially with this new GOP infighting that's broken out, particularly since the summers began. And also with, a lot of people say Super Bowl hangover for the team that wins the Super Bowl. It's tough to make it back the next year. Kind of the same thing with this. Republicans swept the 24 elections, and it was almost a hangover that, it's just a couple seats, a couple state executives. Let's not really care about this election. So I think that's the wrong way of thinking. But we're going to break this down a little more for you. And I actually got a presentation for you. Let's see if we can get this guy here. Excuse me 1 second. I'm going to try and pull this up. Here, let's see if I can just do this real quick. Oh, that's right. Okay, so just one real quick with that. I am on a different Google account with this, so I do need to. I wish I could find a way to just immediately do this real quick, but let's go to. All right, awesome. It should. All right, let's see if I can get this guy in there now. Awesome. Let's share the screen. All right, tremendous. Okay. So let's wonderful. So these elections that just occurred on Tuesday, there were a couple more outside of the main three that I mentioned to you. However, let's break them down. Let's first, all right, so election night 2025 results breakdown. And let's start at the Virginia governor and the Virginia races. There was also the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the attorney general. Also, their state house, the Virginia House of Delegates, all of their seats were up. Also, before 149 Dem majority, I believe, and or actually, it might have been GOP majority. But regardless, very, very tight, very close partisan breakdown in the Virginia House of Delegates. And actually, it was Democrat because of the speaker. But regardless, Earl Sears did not have the coattails at all, only garnering 42.5% of the vote, much lower than I thought personally. I thought, it wasn't looking great for her. However, it was a little more disappointing in my opinion. And excuse me one second. I'm going to just close the door. Sorry. I kept getting distracted. Let's go back to presentation. Okay, so yeah, so once some Earl Sears, which just didn't have the coattails, didn't have the momentum. I thought her campaign was fine. It wasn't diversified enough in the sense that the only issues she really discussed were the trans bathroom issue, anything to do with LGBT, all these social issues that are red meat for the base. But ultimately, what Spanberger was able to hit on was the Doge cuts and the government shutdown related stuff to do with all the federal employees in Northern Virginia, around right here. So if you kind of follow my cursor, DC's around this area up here. It's kind of at the top. I don't think that's an accurate map. However, currently in DC, there are a ton of federal workers, federal employees, etc., that live in Northern Virginia that were either laid off or forced to move or have their lifestyles thrown up into a bunch of pieces, and that changed things. So Spanberger was able to kind of run on opposition to Trump generally, and even the stuff you would think that would give the GOP and the Republicans a boost ultimately fell flat. Even the guy Jay Jones, the attorney general candidate who threatened it, or didn't even threat, said, "Hey, I want to put a bullet in the Todd Gilbert's head and also kill his children," and said he wasn't joking about it. He won by 200,000 votes Tuesday night. So even the stuff that should have helped the Republicans ultimately did not come home to roost at all. And the lack of coattails cost Virginia House of Delegate candidates a ton of seats. Democrats now have a supermajority in the House of Delegates, and that's going to have some big consequences because you've already seen this from, I believe her name is L. Lucas or something like that, the state Senate majority leader or whatever, or the Dem leader or whatever her title is, they're going to redraw their congressional maps and make it 10-1, and that's going to solidify people like Eugene Vindman that used to hold Abigail Spanberger's seat in Congress. That's going to make that seat that much more safe, even, and it's going to draw out a couple GOP Congress people. So there are going to be some more consequences for the party in general than just the governor's mansion in Richmond. There's also going to be a couple Republicans that are now going to, they're toast come the midterms. Their districts are just going to be redrawn. But we're seeing this in several states around the country. So this isn't really anything groundbreaking or extraordinary in particular. It's just something that is happening. So in general, it would have been nicer to run a little more competitive of a race, but life kind of goes on in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So now we're going to head to New Jersey. Okay. So you have, again, another disappointing performance generally, because Jack Ciattarelli only lost by 85 or some odd thousand votes last cycle, or when he ran in 2021 against Phil Murphy, the current Democratic incumbent governor. And it was much more competitive, even though it was Joe Biden had just ascended to the presidency. So it was kind of the opposite of what happened tonight, generally. Like Glenn Youngkin won in Virginia 4 years ago, running on education, beat Terry McAuliffe. He had that slip up in the debate, as we all know about. But this also should have been more competitive in general, and it really wasn't. Some people, last couple weeks, days, were trying to, say, hey, Jack's got a shot. He really never had a shot. That's a 13-point defeat. And what I believe New Jersey was closer than even Arizona, what was seen as a much more, of a prize of a swing state in the 2024 election between President Trump and then former Vice President Harris. And this showed that sometimes elections are very of the moment, right? I know Jack was hoping that the congestion pricing from New York Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul, because here, let's draw up this cursor. Excuse me. Gonna have these, towns and cities and townships, essentially suburbs of New York, more or less, right? And the congestion pricing is $9 a day, get across to New York for work. Essentially a tax, a daily work tax, going to work tax. And not even that was able to really garner any significant momentum. And, life just kind of goes on with this also, right? It would have been nicer to be more competitive, but, that's it. Okay, so the big, out of all of the elections Tuesday, the one that definitely got the most attention was the, New York City mayoral election. And it had to do with, we really learned about Zoran back in June once he became the nominee and defeated Cuomo and I believe, 7, 8 other Democratic candidates in the primary, just as state assemblymen, 33 at the time, now 34. And I want to make this very clear. He is the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. You just saw former Speaker Pelosi this morning call it quits, retiring after, I think she's 85, 86. That could be a reason, but the Democrats are at a spot to where they're also kind of shedding and going through their remakeup of the party, of their party, kind of like the Republicans did in 2016 a little bit. So the Dems, it's just been delayed because Uh, Bernie got close in 16, wasn't able to ultimately finish it out. And then in 2020, the Dems had more of a, all right, we need to win this kind of mindset. And they went with Biden. And then in 24, sh- to even go how far they didn't want someone like Zoran or a more non-establishment candidate in is that they didn't even host the primary. Remember, right? Biden, he announced he wasn't going to seek re-election or the nomination, or well, he had already become the nominee. He had won the primary votes and was the poised to be the nominee last year. And instead of hosting a primary or something like that, they just stuck in Harris, right? So this is it's been a long time in the making. Let's just say that his family, the Cuomo family is a dynasty, honestly, in New York politics. You have Mario Cuomo, governor of the state. His father in the 80s and early 90s, his brother, you probably have seen him on CNN or News Nation, one of those media channels. So we're talking about a huge political family got demolished by this 34-year-old democratic socialist, whatever term you want to call him. Definitely not the same ideology or all of it as Andrew Cuomo. And it really wasn't ever competitive, honestly. Once the primary was over in June, he was kind of the de facto candidate, the de facto mayor elect, more or less. Curtis really seemed to be an authentic, nice guy, just wasn't able to really gain anything with Cuomo sticking in. You have the corruption scandal with Eric Adams, and then the incumbent Democratic mayor suspended his campaign. Even it got so bad at one point. And so the biggest takeaway from this is, yeah, you can look at the stuff he's talked about and the policies, right? Free bus, city run grocery stores, all of the, more socialist policies. But an important thing that people need to grasp with is that he is now the de facto leader of the party. If you start doing polling, I guarantee he'd be one of the most popular people nationwide in the Democratic Party among Democratic Party voting base. So just keep that in mind as we continue, as he develops. He's going to kind of think of him with the Bernie Sanders brain and a Gavin Newsom talent level in politics, right? He's not a bad politician in the sense that he is likable among the base he's trying to chase and got a majority of the vote. And this was I believe the most highly, by raw voting numbers, the most number of voters in 50 some odd years or something like that, a very long time. So he'll be an important subplot that we need to pay attention to into the future, as particularly with ICE, right? That's going to be the big thing. At some point, there's going to be some showdown between him and the federal government, and we'll see what happens. Okay. So that's my big takeaway from New York. Okay. So we covered this election, wasn't nationally really talked about, but just kind of something funny that uh, that we discussed on the pre-election coverage and on Tuesday night. And so this Dan Miller guy is not actually a Republican. So he's a Democrat that ran against Wanda in the Democratic primary for mayor of the capital of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. And he lost by, I think, 80 votes, 81, 82, 83, something like that, just a little more than 80. But through Facebook and local activism, his supporters also said, "Hey, there's no Republican candidate running, so if we can uh, organize a campaign, a write-in campaign for him on the Republican side, we can at least advance him to the general election, even if he doesn't win in the primary." And it worked out. Only took a couple dozen votes to do that, and so he was able to advance on the GOP side, even though he's not a Republican at all. And Wanda Williams was seen as particularly vulnerable because allegations of major corruption, like unable to produce a city budget ever, screaming matches at city council meetings, nepotism, giving city employment jobs to her political allies and friends and inner circle. Right. So a very corrupt mayor. And she won by, believe, more than a couple thousand votes last on Tuesday. So it just goes to show that even though you had a Democrat essentially running against her, that the party ID still matters so much with the normie voters out there. That's all a lot of people look at. So uh, I believe this is and it's not even an endorsement of Miller. It's a, hey, you have a corrupt mayor. She's got to get out. That's all that matters. When you have someone that stinking corrupt, time for them to get out. So, Wanda was able to win by a pretty sizable margin in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. In Minneapolis, we also discussed this one a little bit on Tuesday evening. This one got some national attention, and it wasn't because of Mr. Frey over here. It had to do with uh, the main socialist challenger, backed by Ilhan Omar and other more leftist Minneapolis Democrats. And Jacob, he won. They have ranked choice voting in the state, and Jacob won. I believe it was the second ballot. Not particularly sure 1,000%, but he got to the majority eventually, and it shows that the big takeaway here is that Jacob, he's almost just as liberal. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he's a moderate Dem or like a GOP Dem or whatever like that. The big thing about Jacob is that incumbency matters a ton in American politics. People are always much more comfortable with the devil that they know than the one that they don't know, if that makes sense, right? So if you're ever thinking about running for office or you're supporting someone running for office, know the current status of that seat. Is there an incumbent? Even to go back with Wanda, right? One of the most corrupt mayors and arguably in the country. It's definitely, if not the country, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And just because people knew that name, you got normies walking in that haven't paid attention. Hey, I'm gonna go vote. I'm gonna do my due diligence and exercise my constitutional duty. As a proud citizen, I'm gonna go vote, and they just vote for the name they see that they've seen before. That's a lot of what local politics is. So it's very important that if you're supporting or wanting to get involved, have a good grasp of the incumbency status of the seat you're wanting to pursue. And this was also not a particular, multiple candidates will be affected and have been affected as a result of this California Proposition 50. Prop 50, what is it? So in 2010, I believe California amended their state constitution through a state referendum that essentially said, hey, we're going to have this nonpartisan redistricting commission that they're going to draw the maps for now on or whatever. And Newsom, to counter what happened in Texas earlier this year, the 5 seats that Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, redraw through the state legislature, said, hey, there's a way we can work around this. And you also have to think Newsom, he wants to run for POTUS, right? So he's trying to be this, uh, the guy that says charge at the front of the battle lines. Hey, I'm gonna go fight for the national Democrats. And so he said, hey, through a state referendum, we can sideline this commission until after the decade, more or less. And so it passed, and at 5 GOP, so other swing Democratic districts, people like Dave Min, they are now much safer now. They get to coast a little bit for a couple cycles, a couple terms. They're not as in much danger now. And Republicans like Kevin Kiley, Doug LaMaffa, Ken Calvert, Daryl Issa, David Valdavo, or whatever his name is, they're all in serious jeopardy and great danger of becoming no longer a congressman after the 2026 elections. Now, I believe the proposition passed almost 2-1, and again, it's a blue state, right? There didn't really hear much of an opposition to the proposition at all. So this was kind of expected. All right, that's all the main. So here, let's stop sharing. Do something that had to discuss with Wanda Williams again. Here, let's watch this little news clip real quick.
The incumbent mayor Wanda Williams won her re-election bid after Dan Miller, the Democratic city treasurer who ran as the Republican nominee, conceded. Mayor Williams won more than half of the vote. Mayor Williams says she looks forward to serving another term, while Miller says her win marks as a sad day for the city.
I feel sad for Harrisburg. I think that, honestly, 4 more years of incompetent leadership, corruption is just not going to be healthy for Harrisburg.
Let's go over the next 4 years with fixing our infrastructure here. And we'll continue on with the downtown business area because that's important to the city of Harrisburg, economic development here. And I've been in conversations with 3 different individuals who want to bring the business downtown. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's hope that we can do it this time. And with the help of City Council, I think we can push this through.
Well, it would to the City Council. But besides that point, it just goes to show that your local elections do matter. What you do on the local level, your community, your neighborhood, and you can affect change. Even though that Miller wasn't able to win, it took just a couple of his buddies to say, hey, if we run a write-in campaign in the primary, we can get you to November regardless, right? So if you really want to get involved in this beautiful country and its political system, know some nooks and crannies, read the laws, read the bylaws in your county, understand that there's more than one, it's called political participation. Run for office, vote, help people out, volunteer, go to your city council meeting, whatever it is, petition your government, go to a peaceful protest, anything like that can be of help. Okay, so wanting to keep this one, within, we're at about a half hour right now. That was around the intended time frame, but if anyone has comments or questions, I'll stick around a few more minutes for that. Okay, let's go. We got a question from Ronwin Nance. What do you think will be the biggest change for New York with this new leadership? See, I think you're going to see I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus of people fleeing the state. I really don't. There may be some people that do it, but it's an international city. There's Wall Street. It would, if the institutions collapse and leave, maybe there would be something big like that. But as of right now, and if places like Wall Street are fleeing the state, then that's much different. We're talking about like a real emergency to where people would be trying to get regime change one way or another, through donors or money. There would be a lot of pressure from the federal government at that point, I think, even. So I'd say the biggest change right now is that you're going to see, uh, I'll go again, like the ICE stuff, the clash with the federal government will change. There won't be, because Eric Adams right now is totally cooperating with whatever the Trump admin is kind of telling him to do at the moment. So I'd say the biggest thing is the what's going to happen with the federal government relationship and his Mondami's regime. Okay, from RD Dixon, you said if they are corrupt, they should get out. Do you think Trump is corrupt and should be replaced? So, in terms of how bad, like, the president, there is a budget, right? There is some stuff like the Epstein files that are unacceptable, I think, for all Republicans should have to uh, rest wrestle with. However, I think the thing is, like, with a replacement, is that JD Vance, he's probably going to be more socially conservative, especially so, like, even if he leaves, there's going to be little to no change there. Um, I think Trump has disappointed Republican voters, and I think that's why you're seeing this major infighting right now occurring within the party. Like the America First versus not America First wing of the party, essentially, more or less. So I think change could be coming, and I think voters are uh, outraged by especially Republican voters like this. But in terms of if he should be replaced, with who, and is that going to be much better, right? It's Vance he's the number two in the admin, and not much will change. So, and he won, right? You know what I mean? And like, I do believe, Wanda, she did win, right? It, even though that she shouldn't have won, you still have to listen to the voters ultimately at the end of the day. Okay, so yeah, if anyone else has any other questions, or if anyone else like wants me to go into like more detail of like the maps, I can pull up the maps screen, share the maps, for the Virginia or New Jersey or California, or any of those contests that occurred Tuesday. If you are if you are American First, do you accept JD Vance's wife and would support him as president? Well, yes, I think people uh I don't see a problem with who your wife, you love your wife. You clearly there's a connection there. I have no problem with his current marriage. It's not my marriage. However, in terms of supporting him for president, if he has some, as you've seen at like the Ole Miss Turning Point USA event I think it was last week, maybe a week ago tonight, or a week ago last night, or something like that. That these young voters are asking him, "Hey, what are your deals with Palantir? What, why won't you disavow Israel at all? Why won't you do this? Why won't you do that?" So I think he has a way to go. Right now, I don't think he has the endorsement from the America First wing. So right now, it's not that I don't support him right now or won't support him in the future, but he has some work. He has some work to do. That's for sure, I think. But yes, in terms of the wife, I don't really buy into if she's an Indian, she's not eligible or whatever like that. So yeah, I think yeah, no problem with that. Good question by Mr. R.D. Dixon again. And yeah, I've noticed the number of people joining the stream has been a little larger last couple times. The Aldini political regime continues to grow, right? And this is important. I really do think this is very important that we can have these conversations and continue to grow the page and my messaging, because I think there really is something good that we can do here, for our country and our way of life and our people and, Americans, and putting America first. Absolutely. But I guess I kind of have a question for the audience. Did anyone see Tucker Carlson and okay. When what will your next show be poor? Oh, maybe be about. So I actually have something teed up. So I want to introduce, as I start getting more comfortable and more efficient with these shows, I my next show ideally is about the 2002 definition of the axis of evil by President Bush, right? So as you've seen back in the summer, what really sparked my interest in all this foreign policy stuff is that one of the core promises from President Trump is that no new wars. We're not going to do any. We're done in the Middle East. We're done with regime change over there, over here, and we're going to put America first. And when he bombed Iran, that was a really head scratcher, right? That's something that was a major core pillar that he broke. Let's be honest, he broke that promise. And so if you start doing a lot of history into Iran, the country itself, and you can go all the way back to Cyrus the Great, even, the king of Persia. But you really want to 2002, 9/11 occurs, and you have this axis of evil that George Bush presents out, and it's these three countries: Iraq, Iran, North Korea. And the main idea is that neither of these three countries can acquire nukes. We no nuclear program, no nuclear three country. They're a threat to the West, etc. And I want to discuss how all three of those once they knew about it, what those three countries did and what they're currently doing, and like with the current state of these three nations. So that's the biggest. That's what I want to get into next time. I want to start introducing more foreign policy into the show, while also having some current event stuff. But tonight I wanted to keep it mainly on the summarizing the election from Tuesday and any consequences from that. But very good question again. But yeah, I guess the question, as I was going to mention, anyone see Tucker Carlson on Megyn Kelly's tour today? I thought that was pretty cool. You're really seeing, I kind of mentioned this Tuesday, but you have, Kevin Roberts, the chair of Heritage, come out last Thursday or something. Okay, so let's take one step back. Tucker talks with Nick on his podcast last Monday, I believe. So like 10 days ago now, something like that. And that sparks an uproar among the non-America First wing of the GOP, more or less. And on Thursday, Kevin Roberts, there were rumors that Tucker was going to be canceled or removed from events at Heritage in the future or something like that. And Kevin Roberts, the president or the chair of Heritage or whatever, the leader of the institution, came out with this video that I don't think anyone with a sound mind could really disagree with at all. That said, hey, uh, our movement is not about canceling people for what they say. We debate ideas, and yeah, that was pretty much it, right? Like, we don't have to agree with everything that everyone has ever said, but there's no reason for canceling people over dialogue. And then that is what caused the uproar, right? Whether it was the donors or the board members or whatever, he was bombarded with stuff. People were calling him up, said, "Hey, dude, what the are you saying in this video here?" And so now you have, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago or whatever, it's almost a hostage video of him saying, "Well, I actually didn't mean what I said last Thursday." So now you get to today with Tucker and Megyn Kelly, and they're like, well, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has been on this too. She was on The View, I believe, Tuesday. She was on CNN this morning, and she's been making her rounds in the media as well. And has said, well, I don't have to agree or disagree with everything every human or has ever said. And that's pretty much it. That's all and that's what Tucker said. Well, if you don't like how I did the interview, you should talk to him. It's my channel, it's my podcast. I'm going to talk to him how I want. I don't give a crap what questions I ask. And yeah, it's just a very interesting time in the right-wing movement in American politics. But okay, if that's the questions, I'll leave it open for like another 60 seconds if anyone else has any other questions. But yeah, kind of trying to make this one a little briefer of an episode tonight. And yeah, maybe try to get back with you next Tuesday, maybe next Wednesday. I do have some travel early next week to deal with. So we'll just kind of see how things wind up and go for the next, I have a busy weekend this weekend, meeting up with some old pals this weekend. So won't be super active this weekend, but, we'll get back to you next week for sure. Okay. So I'm gonna call it there unless if someone says something during the exit, but okay, well, this has been another episode of Awoken with Aulden, and I'm your host, Aulden S. Nance, and you have been awoken with Aulden. All right, much love. Good night, everybody.